What if I told you, the way you treat a woman when you have nothing is the exact same way you'll treat her when you have everything? Most men think money will change them. It won't. It only reveals who they already were. There are 4 levels of wealth a man passes through in his life: broke, comfortable, rich, and untouchable. And at every single one of them, a woman is watching, quietly taking notes. She's not measuring your bank account. She's measuring something else entirely. Something most men don't even know they're broadcasting every single day. And by the time he realized what it was already too late. Let's call him Daniel. 25 years old. $8 an hour. And one woman, who would either become his proof or his warning. At level 1 broke, Daniel had nothing to offer. No fancy dinners. No nice car. Just his words, his time, and his attention. And that was the test he didn't know he was taking. Here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to admit. Most broke men aren't kind because they're good. They're kind because they have no other currency. Take away the excuse of poverty, and you find out who they really are. Now fast forward. Same man. Different bank balance. 6 figures. A nice apartment. And suddenly, the way he looks at women starts to shift. Just slightly. Just enough. This is the part nobody talks about. Wealth doesn't corrupt men. It removes their disguise. And what's underneath is usually exactly what was always there. Daniel didn't notice it happening. Nobody does. It creeps in through small moments. A missed thank you. A raised eyebrow at a waitress. A joke that wasn't really a joke. But there was one night that changed everything. One night, at a restaurant, with a woman he respected. Daniel said something he never thought he was capable of saying. And the look on her face told him everything he needed to know about who he'd become. Here's the hidden struggle almost no one names. Money gives a man options. And options reveal character faster than poverty ever could. Because when you can get away with treating someone poorly, the real question is, will you? Daniel started dating less seriously. Not because he found someone better. But because somewhere in his mind, a quiet voice started whispering, you can do better now. That voice is more dangerous than any debt he'd ever had. Psychologists call this entitlement creep. It doesn't arrive all at once. It arrives one ignored text, one cancelled plan, one dismissive comment at a time. And most men don't feel it happening until someone else points it out. One woman, his college girlfriend, noticed it first. She told him, you used to listen. Now you just wait for your turn to talk. Daniel laughed it off. But she wasn't laughing. She left 3 months later. And Daniel told himself it was about timing. Career goals. Distance. He told himself a lot of things. None of them were the real reason. This pattern shows up everywhere, across every income bracket. The waiter who gets ignored. The assistant who gets talked over. The barista who gets a short, clipped order with no eye contact. Small moments. Same route. Here's what makes this so dangerous. The men who change the most are usually the last to know it. Their friends notice first. Their family notices next. And the women in their lives? They notice immediately. And here's the part that should scare every ambitious man listening. This isn't just a relationship problem. It's a wealth problem. Because the way you treat people without power is the most accurate predictor of how you'll handle power itself. Investors know this. Business partners know this. The way a man treats a server at dinner is often the exact reason a deal falls through later. Character isn't separate from wealth. It's the foundation wealth is built on, or destroyed by. Daniel didn't know any of this yet. He just knew something inside him felt different. Colder somehow. And he had no idea that the worst version of himself was still 3 wealth levels away. 2 years later, Daniel hit level 3. Rich, by any normal definition. 7 figures in the bank, a corner office, and a calendar full of attention he never had to chase before. But something was missing, and he couldn't name it. He took a woman to dinner at the kind of restaurant he used to only see in movies. And when the wine arrived 10 minutes late, he didn't ask what happened. He snapped. Right in front of her. She didn't say anything that night. She just watched. The way you watch someone you're starting to see clearly, for the very first time. His best friend Marcus pulled him aside the next week and said something Daniel never forgot. You used to thank the bus driver. Now you don't even look at the valet. Daniel laughed it off. Again. But the woman from that dinner? She stopped returning his texts within the month. And when he finally asked why, her answer cut deeper than any rejection he'd ever felt. She said, "You didn't get worse to me. You got worse to everyone. I just finally noticed." Daniel didn't sleep that night. Here's the real-life consequence almost nobody connects to money. The same coldness that cost him a relationship was already showing up in his business meetings. His team noticed. His investors noticed. People always notice. Turnover on his small team doubled that year. Exit interviews kept circling the same theme, quietly, carefully worded, but unmistakable. He had stopped listening to anyone he didn't need. For the first time since he was $8 an hour, Daniel felt truly alone. Surrounded by people. Speaking to no one. And he started asking himself a question he'd been avoiding for years. What if the problem was never the women? What if the problem was never even the money? What if it was something underneath both, something he was about to find out he shared with almost every man on earth? Here's the lie almost every man believes, whether he admits it or not: I'll treat people better once I have enough. Enough money. Enough success. Enough security. But enough never comes. Not for anyone. Daniel believed that lie completely. He thought level 4, the untouchable tier, would finally make him calm enough to be kind. He was about to learn just how wrong that was. Then Daniel met Walter Reyes. Self-made. Worth north of $200 million. And somehow, the most respectful man Daniel had ever shared a room with. Walter remembered the name of every single staff member at the restaurant. He asked the valet about his daughter's surgery. He thanked the host twice. Daniel sat there, stunned, watching a master class he didn't know he needed. Daniel finally asked him, "Has money made this easy for you?" Walter smiled, the kind of smile that's earned, not performed. "Son," he said, "I treated people exactly like this when I had $11 to my name." And there it was. The lie, fully exposed. Money was never the variable. It was never the cause of kindness, or the excuse for cruelty. It was only ever the microphone. It just made the existing signal louder. Daniel sat back in his chair, and for the first time in years, he felt something close to shame. Not because he was poor. Not because he was rich. But because he finally understood what he'd been broadcasting the whole time. Walter wasn't done. He leaned forward and said something that would replay in Daniel's mind for the rest of his life. Women don't watch your wallet. They watch your hands. What you do with power when no one's forcing you to behave. And it wasn't just about romance. It never was. Walter explained that every woman in Daniel's life, his mother, his sister, his future partner, his future daughter, was quietly building a file on exactly the kind of man he was becoming. That night, Daniel went home and did something he hadn't done in years. He wrote a list. Not of goals, not of income targets, but of every person he treated carelessly on the way up. The list was longer than he expected. The list had 14 names on it. Old coworkers. An ex. A delivery driver he'd been short with during a bad week. Daniel stared at it for almost an hour before he made a decision that would change everything that came next. He picked up the phone and called the first name. Not to impress her. Not to fix anything. Just to say the 4 words most men never say: "I'm sorry. You mattered." She didn't say much back. Just, "I appreciate you saying that." And somehow, that single sentence, did more for Daniel than any deal he'd ever closed. At the very top, level 4, the untouchable tier, the gap widens even further. Some men there are surrounded by people who fear them. Others are surrounded by people who'd walk through fire for them. Same income. Completely different legacy. Think of the executive who controls every room through intimidation. People obey him. They don't love him. And the moment his power slips, even slightly, everyone he protected disappears overnight. Now think of the other kind. The one whose assistant has worked for him for 19 years. Whose ex-wife still speaks well of him. Whose daughter calls him her hero, not her funder. That's a different kind of wealth entirely. So here's the lie, named plainly, one more time, that money is a character upgrade. It's not. It's a character amplifier. And amplifiers don't fix what's broken. They just make sure everyone can hear it. Daniel sat with that for days. The shame faded slowly, and something more useful took its place. Not guilt. Direction. He didn't want to just feel different. He wanted to actually become someone different. He went back to Walter and asked the only question that mattered now. How do I actually fix this? Not just think about it. Fix it. Walter's answer surprised him completely. Walter said there were exactly 4 habits that separate men who get worse with money from men who get better. Before I tell you what they are, I want to ask you something. If you suddenly had 10 times your current income tomorrow, would you become more generous, or more guarded? Tell me option 1, generous, or option 2, guarded. Be honest in the comments below. Walter leaned back and said, money doesn't build character, Daniel. Habits do. And there are 4 of them, practiced at every income level, that separate the men who rot from the men who grow. Habit number 1. Treat the person with the least power in the room the way you treat the person with the most. The waiter. The intern. The Uber driver. That's not etiquette. That's the entire test, every single time. Daniel started small. He learned the name of the barista he saw every morning. He asked about her classes. It felt strange the first week. By the third, it felt like remembering who he used to be. Habit number 2. Never let your calendar speak for your character. Being busy is not permission to be dismissive. Walter said the busiest men he knew were also the ones who somehow always made you feel like you had their full attention. Daniel tested it in his next meeting. He put his phone face down. He looked people in the eye when they spoke. It cost him nothing. It changed how every single person in that room responded to him. Habit number 3. Apologize before you're caught, not after. Most men only soften their behavior once consequences show up. Walter said real growth happens when no one's watching, and no one would ever know. Habit number 4, the one Walter called the rarest. Let people leave better than they found you. Not richer necessarily. Better. Heard. Respected. Remembered kindly. That's the wealth that doesn't show up on any balance sheet. This one hit Daniel hardest. He thought about every woman he'd brushed off, not because he got caught, but simply because he could. The habit wasn't about avoiding punishment. It was about not needing one. Daniel sat there turning the 4 habits over in his mind. None of them required money. None of them required status. They only required something far more uncomfortable, consistency, even when nobody was grading him for it. He thanked Walter, drove home, and for the first time in a long time, made a decision that had nothing to do with his bank account. He decided to test these 4 habits for 90 days straight, and document every single result. Day 1. Daniel grabbed a plain notebook, nothing fancy, and wrote a single line at the top: 90 days for habits, 0 excuses. He had no idea this notebook would end up changing more than just his behavior. The first test came faster than he expected. An assistant brought him the wrong coffee order. His old instinct, sharp, dismissive, came up his throat in half a second. He almost let it out. But he caught it. Just barely. He said, "No worries, thank you for trying." Small words. Massive difference. The assistant's face changed instantly. So did something inside Daniel. Every night, he wrote down one moment where he chose differently. Some nights it was small, a thank you he almost skipped. Other nights, it was something that scared him to write down honestly. 2 weeks in, he went on a date with someone new. Old Daniel would have spent the whole dinner checking his phone, half present, performing interest instead of feeling it. New Daniel put the phone away before she even sat down. He asked questions and actually waited for the answers. He noticed her hands shaking slightly, nervous, and softened his voice without even thinking about it. She told a friend the next day, he actually listened. Like, the whole time. She didn't know it. But that sentence was the entire 90-day experiment working, exactly as designed. By week 4, it wasn't just women noticing. His assistant stayed 20 minutes late without being asked. His barista started saving him the good pastries. People respond to presents faster than they respond to money. Daniel was finally proving it to himself. But week 6 brought the hardest test yet. A massive deal closed, more money landing in his account in one transfer than he made in his first 3 years combined. And with it came the oldest temptation of all. For exactly one night, Daniel felt the old pull return, the urge to coast, to relax the habits now that he'd made it. What he did next determined whether the last 60 days had meant anything at all. He sat with that feeling instead of acting on it. He realized, for the first time with total clarity, that this exact moment, flush with success, easy to excuse, was the moment Walter had warned him about. So he did something almost no wealthy man does after a big win. He called his old college girlfriend, the one who told him he stopped listening, and simply said thank you for noticing first. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I wasn't expecting that. Daniel hadn't expected to make the call either. Growth rarely looks the way you planned it. Something shifted permanently after that call. Daniel stopped thinking of the 4 habits as a discipline he was performing. They started becoming something closer to identity. The difference between acting kind and actually being kind. He thought back to the version of himself at level 1, broke, attentive only because he had nothing else to offer. He realized now that version had been closer to the truth than the rich version who'd lost his way. The real breakthrough came in an unexpected sentence from his sister. She told him, You used to scare me a little when you talked about your exes. Now you don't. Daniel hadn't even noticed the fear had been there. He realized that fear, the quiet, low-grade kind that women sometimes carry around certain men, isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's just a held breath. A careful word choice. A relief when he leaves the room. And here's the breakthrough that mattered most for his finances too. The version of Daniel that made people feel safe was also the version people wanted to do business with, invest with, stay loyal to. Trust compounds exactly like money does. By day 80, the notebook was almost full. Daniel flipped back to the first page, the one that just said, 90 days for habits, 0 excuses. He barely recognized the man who wrote it. There were 10 days left in the experiment. And one final test was coming, one Daniel never saw coming, that would prove whether any of this had actually taken root, or whether it was simply a very convincing performance. Day 85. Daniel sat down at the most important dinner of his career so far. A potential investment that could triple his company's valuation. And across the table sat a man who treated the server like furniture. The investor snapped his fingers at her. Made a joke at her expense. Laughed when she flinched. The old Daniel, the one chasing the deal at any cost, would have laughed along. Just to keep the room comfortable. Daniel felt the old instinct rise immediately, the urge to stay quiet, smile, protect the money. 90 days of habits versus one moment that could cost him millions. This was the test Walter had warned him about. He set his fork down, looked the investor directly in the eye, and said calmly, She's doing her job well. Let's not make this harder for her. The table went silent. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. The investor's jaw tightened. Daniel had no idea if he just lost the biggest deal of his life. And honestly, he realized he didn't care as much as he expected to. The investor studied him for a long moment, then actually smiled. "Most guys in your position would have laughed," he said. "That's exactly why I want to work with you." The deal closed 2 weeks later, bigger than before. But here's what mattered more than the deal. The waitress, whose name was Renee, slipped him a note on the receipt that simply said, "Thank you for seeing me." 3 words. He kept that receipt for years. That night, lying awake, Daniel understood something Walter never fully said out loud. How you treat women, all women, strangers and partners and family alike, isn't separate from your success. It's the test success keeps quietly grading you on. 90 days had passed. 4 habits. 14 apologies. 1 almost lost deal that turned into the biggest of his career. And 1 quiet truth sitting underneath all of it, simple enough to say in a single sentence. Money never made Daniel a better man. It just gave him more chances, every single day, to prove which kind of man he already was. And he was finally proud of the answer. So here's the warning, and I want you to actually hear this. Whatever level of wealth you're at right now, broke, comfortable, rich, or somewhere you haven't even imagined yet, you are already revealing who you are. Right now. Today. The way you spoke to a customer service rep this week. The way you tipped or didn't. The way you talked about an ex when no one was checking your tone. That's not random. That's the file being built. And here's the part that should genuinely concern you. The habits you practice broke, you'll practice rich. Just louder. Just with higher stakes. Just with fewer people brave enough to call you out on it. If you can't treat a woman with respect when you have nothing to offer her but your attention, more money won't fix that. It will only buy you a longer runway before the people around you find out the truth. Daniel is still running his habits today, years later, worth far more than he ever imagined at level 1. Not because the money changed him. Because he finally stopped waiting for it to. He still carries that old receipt from Renee in his wallet, faded now, barely readable. Not as a trophy. As a reminder of the exact moment he chose to become someone instead of perform someone. So if you're watching this at level 1 broke, struggling, comparing yourself to everyone with more, here's the secret nobody tells you. You are being tested right now, in real time. And the test isn't about money at all. The way you treat the woman serving your coffee, the way you speak to your mother on a hard day, the way you handle someone who can't do anything for you, that's the actual blueprint. Wealth just makes it visible to everyone else later. So before you go, I want to leave you with the same question Walter left Daniel with, the one that actually started this whole transformation. If everyone around you suddenly had zero ability to help your career, your status, or your bank account, would they still say you treat them well? Option 1, yes, nothing would change. Option 2, honestly, you're not sure. Tell me which one in the comments. And if this hit you somewhere, share it with the man in your life who needs to hear it most.